So we're at page 22 of the Public Places Bylaw, and I just want to check in with members whether there were any other questions or clarifications we needed before we move to the first recommendation, which is around the beach access. So any further clarifications needed or questions? I'll take it there are none. Oh, Councillor Tukapua?
Oh, no, but just flagging that I'd raised something in the adjournment that will come up later.
Thank you. That will come up under a separate recommendation from this one. Thank you. So for the beach access, which the recommendation sits on page 23, clause 18, that the committee retain the proposed restrictions on vehicle access to beaches, with exceptions for emergency services and specific recreational activities. However, given the community feedback for and against the provisions is balanced, the committee might like to consider whether a separate beach bylaw might be appropriate. Should this be the case, designated access points and public education on responsible beach use could be prioritised. So my question at this stage is whether anyone's prepared to move that in its present form. Yeah, it's page 23, clause 18, Councillor Tamihana. Oh, Councillor Jennings.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I had wondered whether, look, I'm happy to move the sentiment here, but I just wonder if we could change a couple of words. That maybe as the committee retain the proposed control mechanisms on vehicle access, so that it emphasises it's about controlling the access and it's not about restricting or taking away necessarily something that's being enjoyed at the moment. It's about controlling. And so obviously the part of that recommendation also where it says designated access points and public education on responsible beach use could be prioritised. I imagine that will come as a package or alongside the council resolution that needs to be made to activate the bylaw, because we're going to have to designate and say, here's the beach access points are here, here and here, and this area of the beach is permitted for vehicle use. Is that my understanding correct on that? Yep. So yeah, with that amendment around the committee retain the proposed control mechanisms on vehicle access to beaches, I'm happy to move that.
Yes, thank you. I was just wondering, Councillor, whether those words the committee might like to consider whether a separate beach bylaw might be appropriate, whether that should be in this recommendation, whether that should be pulled out as a separate recommendation. How do you feel about it? Oh, sorry, Mayor Bernie.
I agree with you. I don't think it should be there as part of this recommendation. This should be a separate recommendation if we want to do it. But I think this is more about the wording for the bylaw, and I agree with Councillor Jennings. His wording is quite appropriate, and that's a discussion or another discussion, if you like, as to whether we have a separate beach bylaw.
Actually, I'm just thinking. Sorry, on the I'm thinking that actually maybe let's just reframe the recommendation altogether and have it as the committee. We're recommending, aren't we? Committee recommend proceeding with the proposed control mechanisms on vehicle access to beaches. Full stop. Oh, okay. So the committee. Retain the proposed control mechanisms on vehicle access to beaches, and then I think it's full stop, because I think the exceptions for emergency services and specific recreational activities can already be captured as part of.
That sounds good. I just want to check it. Are there any fishhooks in that rewording from an officer point of view? Not including the specific points in the public education and so on.
Not that I can foresee, no.
So with that wording, is there a seconder for that wording? Seconded by Mayor Burney. Open for discussion.
So,
Councillor Jennings.
thank you, Mr. Chair. So, just hearing the submissions today, it's clear that there is probably some misunderstanding about the intent and what will happen in relation to the additional clauses that we put inside the bylaw around beach access. And so I think that a number of those concerns and fears can be allayed by reinforcing that this is about creating or giving council a toolbox of options, and that this is about controlling poor behaviour and dealing with those things that we don't want to happen in the beach environment, and that is not to be confused with taking away beach access for vehicles and people at the moment. So really comfortable with this recommendation that we've put forward. Would like to see some small changes to the bylaw wording itself, particularly around that 14.3, which was around that walking access, and you welcome some further discussion around that. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Mayor Burney?
The 14.3 is obviously the one sentence or one thing that everyone picked out that was unclear in terms of what it meant. And I actually like this wording because it does give some flexibility around how we actually operate the bylaw, that we're not being hard and fast, that we are providing flexibility. And a lot of submitters, I think, tried to go too far or too deep into specific issues around the bylaw. The bylaw is still the overarching way that we want to rate. It's got to be there because we do unfortunately have people who abuse that piece of land. So, and the other thing was for me was around some of the definitions around access routes and defined, the access ways. Making those clearer probably is probably something that we need to look at. But that's an operational thing rather than a bylaw thing.
Thank you. Councillor Tukupu.
Question, please clarify for me where we will capture that last sentence in the original recommendation, particularly around the education and making that a priority. Where else will that go if it's not carried through at this point? Sam seems to think it's a given, but when you want something to be a priority, you usually have to resolve it to be, otherwise it's just left in wonderland.
There's the opportunity, with the permission of the mover and seconder, to add a phrase like "and further designation, access point and public education will be a priority." That could be added as a "and further" to capture.
I would support this recommendation if that was included.
Mover's comfortable, seconder's comfortable. Have we captured that? And that's been captured. Thank you. So further discussion. Councillor Tommy Hunt.
I'm just probably the last point I raised before you stopped earlier was about the impact of macro and customary recreational users. I'm just concerned we're not capturing anything in there that recognises that at all. It's a major concern for me. Would you like to move a recommendation, or I'm not. It's probably more for Vi to consider about some wording, because as I raised the question earlier, is what's their responsibility around implementing MACA legislation, and if they can't do it, then we need to ensure that it's still recognised somewhere in here, because if it's not us doing it, there's someone out there doing it.
Vi?
Thanks, Councillor Tamihana. If the concern is around, so thinking about MACA and protection maybe of customary rights, and if the concern is around the protection of customary rights, then potentially we could put add a component in the bylaw that makes it clear that it's not intended to infringe or distinguish customary rights, if that's the concern.
Thank you, I think that gives me some
So just as a
comfort.
just as a process, do you require a resolution to that effect, or can that be noted? If in doubt, we'll resolve it.
I think best practice would be to have a resolution around that, and because it doesn't materially change the provisions that are in the bylaw, I don't believe that it's outside of the scope of what we can include.
Do you need some help with the wording? Do you want Vi to repeat hers? Vi, would you mind repeating? Oh, you've got the one. Oh, yes, sorry, you're quite right. Yeah, so the resolution on the table at the moment. Yep, okay, so no right of reply needed. Councillor Jennings, I'll put it then. Those in favour, please say aye. Against, say no. That's carried. Thank you. And we'll just check the wording. Yeah, for them.
Yeah, so the wording I'm proposing for that I would recommend to you is the committee notes the draft Public Places Bylaw is not intended to interfere with customary rights.
Are you okay with that wording?
I think if you're going to look at recreational rights, different again from customary rights.
Yep. So you're happy to move that?
Customary interests and rights. Yeah.
That is moved. Is there a second for that? Seconded by Councillor Dukapua. Any further discussion? Appears to be none. I will put it. Those in favour, please say aye. Against, say no. That is carried. And the other issue is around the walkers, on the dunes. Perhaps need to tidy that up too. Just again, we're in your hands, as to how that is best captured.
Thank you. My recommendation or suggestion to the committee would be to look at the words in clause 14.3 and suggest the removal of walk through. So a person must not, without prior written consent from the council, walk through. So remove the walk through, but retain the rest of that clause, which goes on to say drive or ride any vehicle, horse or other animals.
Thank you. And you're happy to move that, Mayor Bernie? Sorry, I didn't mean to catch you off guard. I thought you were not.
I'm just trying to, as long as we capture the fact that people are able to, sort of still wander through the dunes, I suppose, is what we're asking, in a considered and proper way. That's what all we're trying to ensure, that they can still do that. Is we're not trying to stop them doing that. That's all.
It's almost like, in a social space you refer to things or try to, in a strengths-based approach, as in give it the positive version rather than the negative. And so in this way it's kind of like the opposite, saying what you can't do rather than what you can do, which eliminates the can't, if that makes sense.
Councillor Tamihana.
Just from memory, thinking back, the issue really arose, didn't it, through the Mackenzie Trail. That's really where it came about.
Oh no, I think it came from the estuary trust people
as well as
brought it up.
Yeah, because it's a bit of a dilemma, isn't it?
As long as you capture the fact that there is the ability to be able to still walk through, you're not being restricted from not walking through. That's why I don't want to.
Which is what the motion on the table is, by removing walkers from the people. It is achieving that effect. Yeah.
I could make.
Oh, okay.
Sure. I'll read it with. Do you want me to read it through with walk through, like in its original state at the moment, and then with it removed, or just with it removed? amended one. Okay, cool. So the new suggested 14.3, a person must not, without prior written consent from the council, drive or ride any vehicle, horse or other animals within any sand dune area, except on any defined vehicle beach access way or any area which is set aside by council for that purpose.
Mayor Boone. Yeah. Mayor Booney's moving. Is there a second? Seconded by Councillor Jennings. Is there any further discussion? Appears not to be. I'll put it. Those in favour, please say aye. Against, say no. That's carried. Thank you for that. So the other question is whether we want to consider recommending that there be a separate beach bylaw. Are we happy that we have dealt with the issue sufficiently under this? Councillor Jennings.
So is the committee? The committee's not the decision maker here. We're essentially making a recommendation to council. Is it? Yeah. So I was looking at sort of potentially two recommendations that could come alongside the bylaw in terms of that paper, which was one that council consider programming a more comprehensive beach bylaw program of works, because I think it signals that we're not clear necessarily on the outcome, but that we want to program a bigger piece of work, because this really is just a stopgap or an initial. So that's issue one.
Let's hear your recommendation.
So the recommendation would be that the committee recommends to council that it undertakes that it programs a comprehensive beach bylaw in its 2025-2026 work program. Beach bylaw review. What's that? A beach bylaw review. Yes. Yeah.
Good. I'm happy to second that. Yeah, I'll jump in, just so it's on the table. Discussion.
So can I speak to it briefly? Because I know that we've discussed this in a workshop, and then also as part of the LTP deliberations, I think it was. And there was some hesitation and there was some concern from some elected members. But I think that all we're doing is recommending that we actually do a process, and that all of those concerns and the full range of views can be brought together, considered, worked up properly, and that we've got time and space to do it, acknowledging that what we've just done in terms of this bylaw is quite, I won't say narrow, but it's an initial suite of works to give us the tools to deal with some of the problems that we've been hearing about and seeing. So, yeah.
And I would just add to that, it is the most divisive issue around both the bylaws, so it's important it be given time to be considered more fully, perhaps. So that's hence I seconded it. Any further discussion around that?
Just a clarification: we don't have a beach bylaw at the moment, correct? Okay. That's right, in Foxton, yes, which turned into a bit of a okay. Yeah. There are a number of wider issues that need to be considered, obviously, in this. Yeah. Okay.
If there's any further discussion, write a reply. Okay, done. So we'll put that. Those in favour, please say aye. Against, say no. That's carried. Thank you for that. Anything more on the beach access issue?
Yes, Mr. Chair, please. I'm just not sure whether this requires a further resolution or recommendation, and so perhaps I'll pitch it as a question to Vi, if that's okay. That presumably alongside the bylaw, when that comes to the council meeting, the package of resolutions needed to designate access points, designate areas of the beach that people can access, all that kind of stuff, because at the moment the bylaw would, without those resolutions, the bylaw would actually in the absence of the resolutions, there's nothing enabled in terms of those access points and that kind of thing. So will the resolutions come as a package alongside the bylaw so that there's sort of seamless sequencing, or do we need a resolution to bring those a recommendation to bring that package of resolutions?
The intent is to have a package all come together as a result of the hearings, and it would be in two parts, one for the land transport, one for the public places, just in bulk.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you. So we move now to fireworks and fires, the submissions there. And just to note that there are two matters Councillor Tukapua raised offline. There are two recommendations in effect on the same issue. The one which is contained on page 23, clause 21, but also on page 24, number 33. So you've done some thinking about that. Do you wish to speak to that?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Allen. So the question posed to me was around fireworks and fires, and some concerns raised in the submission from Fire and Emergency New Zealand around their concerns that the provisions in the bylaw might drum up some of the work their way, and maybe some unrealistic expectations from the community around dealing with fires and fireworks. So the suggestion was about the question was about whether we should include some considerations from Fire and Emergency New Zealand into the bylaw. And I've gone and had a look at where in other pieces of legislation or in other bylaws this sort of thing features. And actually in the Building Act 2004, when looking at dangerous and unsanitary buildings, it has in there that officers, or territorial authorities, in this case here council officers, can make a decision based on advice and feedback from Fire and Emergency New Zealand. And so I've got a suggestion that we can either add to 13.1 and 13.3, or we can add as 13.1a, 13.3a, and it is, once I bring it up, we're looking at 13.1. It says a person must not discharge a firework in a public place without first obtaining a permit from the council. 13.1a could say, in deciding if a permit to be granted, the council may seek advice from employees, volunteers and contractors of Fire and Emergency New Zealand. We could add the same point A to 13.3 if we wish.
Thank you. Councillor Jennings.
Yeah, I'm happy to move that the amendment to the insertion of that wording into the bylaw. Have you captured the wording, or do we need?
Yeah, Grayson, it's in hand. Yeah. Councillor Tukapua, are you comfortable with that? Thank you. Happy to second that. Thank you. Any discussion? Appears to be none. I'll put it. Councillor Tommy.
It's the submission from Mr. Mayor that captured me around. So we're saying no fires and no fireworks in all public spaces.
Permits.
But permits. So that means, so does that include the beach? So if a family want to go out there and light a driftwood fire and cook sausages, do they need a permit from us?
The way that the clause is in the bylaw at the moment, yes, that's what it is. If we're thinking about compliance and enforcement and actually how we apply this, we're not going to know, officers aren't going to know about every fire that's happening on a beach unless someone calls us to complain about it. When an enforcement officer goes out to look at that, they'll apply the compliance and enforcement strategy around the reason why are we out there, what risk is there. So to answer your question, Councillor Tamihana, yes, as it's written at the moment, it does say even including on beaches.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't support that. Seasonal use. Yeah, I'm struggling with that, boy. I'm sorry. I don't understand why we would expect people to apply for a permit. I'm sorry, we don't ask for a permit at home when they burn fires outside in their
Yes, we do.
with a brazier.
Oh, not brazier.
No, with a brazier. With an open barbecue. Do we ask for a permit for an open barbecue? So this is what we're asking here.
Further discussion. Who moved it? I've forgotten who moved it.
Yeah, I moved it, but
Yeah, so you haven't spoken yet, though, have you?
no, I haven't.
No. Okay, go for it.
So all I was going to say is I think that on the topic of fires, there is already national legislation as well as other legislation in place at a local level that already restricts and controls the way in which fires can be lit and with a permitting framework in place. I think that the real addition to this public places bylaw is more around the fireworks component. And so perhaps, Mr. Chair, we could get some advice quickly from Vi around what current arrangements are in place around lighting of fires, because my understanding was that you already require a permit to light a fire in certain locations, and I've always been under the impression that it was not permitted to light a fire on the beach because of the fragile coastal environment, and that was a sort of a national thing. But yeah,
Fine.
Thank you, Councillor Jennings. So, Fire and Emergency New Zealand do have powers under the Fire and Emergency Act around fires, public or private fires. The challenge that they have is that distinguishing or asking a person to put out a fire, if it is out of hand or if it's threatening persons or property, they have the power to be able to do that. Stopping a person from having a fire in a public place is not a power that they have. And so the introduction of having that into our bylaw is to enable that at the front end for a power that venues don't currently have.
Thank you. Further discussion? No, you've spoken once. I'm sorry, Councillor. Any? Mayor Bernie?
I'm comfortable with actually it because, as Vi has said, while the words may be there, the intent of the policy is not to be, come down hard on those that are having a small barbecue on the beach. I don't think that's the intent of the policy. But if you don't have something like that, then those that get out of control, the bonfires, the New Year's Eve parties or things like that, can't be dealt with because we haven't got those words in there. So I think it's the intent of the wording is more than the operation of the wording, and I'm comfortable actually that we do include it.
Thank you. Right to reply, Councillor Jennings?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Having just reflected on the wording, I kind of get where Councillor Tamihana is coming from. However, I've reflected on the wording, and so it's 13.1 is clear that that's the firework in a public place that requires a permit. If you want to light a fire in a public place, that just requires written approval from council. And so presumably that written approval could be delivered in different ways, where it could be to an individual, it could be published in a newspaper, it could be on a sign for different circumstances and different situations. So I think that actually there is sufficient flexibility, discretion within the bylaw that also allows us to control the activity ultimately and sort of achieve the end outcome. So, I'm actually comfortable with the wording, and I think I'll support it.
Thank you. So we have discussed it, so I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Are you happy? You'll remember what the motion is? You don't want to repeat for you? Sorry. No, sorry. We follow the process of the committee. Those in favour, please say aye. Those against? No. Yeah. Thank you. That is carried, and we go now to are we onto the smoke-free? Yes, we're onto the smoke-free, aren't we? Page 23, smoke-free and vape-free provisions and
David, sorry, can I forgot to mention, yesterday I rang the fire department to try and understand the number of fires that they've had to attend to due to fireworks in the district over the last little while, just to get a feel of, are they causing... Unfortunately, they've treated it as a legoima, so I don't have that data, and they're going to give it to me in a few weeks' time. But I just thought, I'm just curious as to, especially those people in submissions saying, they don't want fireworks in public spaces either in terms of that. And anyway, I'll just give that for your information.
Thank you. That's noted, Mayor Bernie. Page, sorry. So, if you wish to comment, please use your microphone.
You haven't considered the cultural impacts of the bylaw you're about to put around fires, and you're actually impeding customs and how we actually operate in our own homes, let alone on our maraes and reservations, let alone other areas that we use. So you're actually completely removing the ability for cultural practices. That's what you're doing.
So, okay. No, okay. So, yeah. So, look, we're following standing orders here, where we went through a proper process with everyone having a right to speak. The decision was made democratically, and I ask us all as a team to accept that decision. Whether or not we agree with it, accept the process. That's what I ask. So we move now to we're on page 23, the smoke-free and vape-free provisions. And the recommendation lies at the bottom of the page, clause 24, that the council endorse the adoption of the proposed smoke-free and vape-free provisions, ensuring clear signage in public areas and at events. Is there anything councillors want to add to that, having heard the submissions? There was the talk about the signage, and Mayor Burney raised, can it be, as seamless as possible across the district?
And Vi, do we request open dining places to show non-smoking or deal with smoking and vaping?
Yes, we do. So, as part of the outdoor dining permit process, we do ask them to have no smoking signage. And just further to that, Health New Zealand spoke about signage, some good questions around them. They actually provide us with some of those green smoke-free signs.
Thank you. Someone prepared to move the recommendation?
Yeah, prior to moving it, Mr. Chair, can I just ask a question to Vi? The written submission from Health New Zealand made some suggestions or recommendations around additional wording, and I just was after your response to that and whether you think that's necessary and appropriate. It was just to help you. It was on page 25, and so I can read it out if that helps. Yeah, so we recommend the following is added to section 9.6 to ensure the intent of the regulations are clear. The quotation marks, if tables, chairs or other seating arrangements are placed on the footpath, then smoke-free/vape-free signage must be present and displayed at all times. No ashtrays or other devices intended for collecting ash may be placed on the tables or seating arrangements. Close quotes.
Thanks, Councillor Jennings. I think that could. So I think the committee has a couple of options. One, option A is that could be covered as part of the operational procedures for officers and as part of the considerations for here is a permit, it says with conditions, one of the conditions is these things. Or two, the committee might consider whether that needs to be added as an additional clause for real absolute clarity, I guess.
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to move the recommendation as is, acknowledging that that submission can be dealt with as an operational consideration.
Thank you. Is there a second for that? Seconded by Mayor Burney. Discussion appears to be none. I will put it. Those in favour, please say aye. Against, say no. That is carried. Wildlife and environmental protection, which attracted 12 submissions. The recommendation is on page 24, clause 27. That council should maintain the provisions that protect sensitive environments, including restrictions on vehicle access and public education on the environmental impact of beach activities. Any questions of officers before we, or anything else want to flag? And if not, I'll ask if anyone's prepared to move. Looks like it's going to lapse for want of a mover. Mayor Burney moves. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Tamihana. Speaking to it, did you wish to make any comments at this stage, Mayor Burney? No. Thank you. Councillor Jennings?
Yeah, so my concern with just the recommendation is it kind of duplicates some recommendations we've already made around the beach topic. And so, in terms of the recommendation itself, what function does it serve in terms of the actual content of the bylaw? Because we can all agree, I'm sure, that the sentiment in terms of maintaining wildlife and environmental protection sort of comes through the various wording that's already in the bylaw. So I'm just not sure the recommendation is required. So on that basis, I don't think I'd support it at this stage.
My understanding is it's more in recognising the submissions and endorsing what they're saying, but I could be wrong. Did you want to comment on that at all, though?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Allen. You're right. It is more around the acknowledging, and perhaps the recommendation could be worded around that rather than mentioning about the provision specifically, because you've had plenty of conversation around that and still some to come. It's more around the acknowledging that there were submissions in relation to that.
Councillor Tamihana.
Hey, I'm comfortable with the recommendation, but with exclusion of the words to be considered if it can be, including restrictions on vehicle access. I think if it just read, council should maintain the provisions that protect sensitive environments and public education on environmental impact of beach activities. Far more sensible for me.
It's just been pointed out, Councillor Hamiana, that you actually seconded the original motion. Yeah. That's absolutely fine. Understanding orders, you can pro forma second and for the purposes of discussion, and then voice your concerns around it. It's unusual, but it's absolutely okay understanding orders. So, yep, so I'm saying absolutely fine what you've done. There's nothing out of order in what you've done. Yeah. Any further discussion?
Can I move a procedural motion then? No, I probably can't.
You can. Okay, so look, it's so the motion is still on the table as is. It's been moved and seconded, so it's absolutely clear what the motion is.
I can move an amendment.
You could, yes, I was hoping you wouldn't remember that.
Yeah.
Yes, you can.
So I'd like to move the amended recommendation with minus that wording, restrictions on vehicle access, as suggested by Councillor Tamihana. So it would read, council should maintain the provisions that protect sensitive environments,
Including public
education on the environmental impact of beach activities.
So that's the amendment. Is there a seconder for that amendment? Seconded by Councillor Tukapua. So the amendment now stands. Any further discussion before I put the amendment? I think we'll keep moving. So those in favour of the amended motion, which deletes those words referenced by Councillor Jennings, those in favour of the amendment, please say aye. Those against, it is carried. So the substantive motion now is as worded. Those in favour, please say aye. Against, say no. That's carried also. Thank you. And moving now to the horse access, and the recommendation, again with page 24, is clause 30, that council should maintain designated access points for horses to avoid congestion and conflicts with pedestrians and vehicles. Any questions or comments before we get to the resolution? Councillor, was your mic on? Or not? No, sorry. I thought I saw your mic on. Yeah. Oh, okay. That's all good. Mayor Burney.
I just wonder why we have to separate pedestrians and horses. It's almost like you've got to have two different paths, which to me seems illogical. If it's only providing access to public spaces and beaches and things like that.
So your suggestion is maybe there's a full stop after conflicts. Is that your suggestion, Mayor Bernie?
I don't know why we're separating horses out of that when, you know, there's conflicts between pedestrians and vehicles as well. You know, so why are we signalling horse users?
Councillor Jennings.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm going to suggest that we don't proceed with this recommendation because we have the suite of resolutions that will come to council alongside the bylaw will designate the access points, and so we'll cover this topic inevitably in terms of horses, pedestrians, vehicles, I imagine. And so if the committee was inclined, perhaps we could phrase something like council acknowledges the need for specific horse access, for specific designation of access for horses. Full stop. It's not really clear why we need this, given the suite of further resolutions that will come.
I think I'll get Vi to comment on that. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. I think what's important for the committee to note is that we also, so alongside the Public Places Bylaw, are other things like reserve management plans, coastal reserve management plans, but also the Parks and Reserves General Policy, which talks about, well, there's actually a blanket ban on horses in those parks and reserves. And a lot of the area to access, say, the beaches actually goes through reserve. And so in that Parks and Reserves General Policy, there is an approval process. There's literally a person applies for approval from the Parks and Property Manager to go through that process of approval. So I just want to point that out.
So with that in mind and feedback from Mayor Bernie and from Councillor Jennings, what are your thoughts in terms of the recommendation? Do you feel there's value in still having a statement in the... Yeah, no, it's to you, Vi. Sorry, yeah. Sorry, that's to Vi.
Thank you. My suggestion would be to include a recommendation along the lines of sorry, let me think about that. So a recommendation along the lines of suggesting that the current access that is available be retained and that the current approval process remain existing.
So that's that wording that'll be captured, but that idea of the existing access and so on, is there someone comfortable to move that, or do you want to talk about it first?
No, I'm happy to move then. I'll just frame it up. Council should maintain existing designated access points for horses. Full stop.
Elegant wording, elegant second. Thank you. Good on you. Any discussion? Appears to be none. I'll put it. Those in favour, please say aye. Against, say no. It's carried. So we move to the fire and emergency thing now. We did talk about it earlier, but there's still merit, I guess, in the recommendation being considered. So the recommendation that sits there, that the committee acknowledges the submission from Fire and Emergency New Zealand and encourage officers to work with FENS to establish clear communications and guidelines. Any questions or comments before we move to the recommendation? Okay. Happy to move the recommendation, someone? Thank you. Councillor Tukapua moves it, seconded by Councillor Jennings. Discussion? Appears to be none. I will put it. Those in favour, please say aye. Against, say no. It is carried. Thank you. Signage and enforcement. The recommendation there that the committee endorse the proposed changes to election signage requirements. That really was very quiet, the public on that issue. Any questions or comments before we move to the recommendation? Mayor Bernie.
I'd like to move an amendment
Oh,
that we ban all election signage.
that lets us for want of a seconder. Okay.
An environmental bloody disaster on our landscape.
Passions are getting very heated here. We'll move. Is anyone prepared to move the recommendation? Thank you. Councillor Jennings moves, seconded by Councillor Tukapua. Any serious discussion? Appears to be none. I'll put it. Those in favour, please say aye. Against, say no. It's carried. The feedback on public health provisions.
I put as crook on this because, sorry, I forgot that there was this recommendation in here. We've already dealt with this through the amendments to the bylaw around the where we talked
Like the alfresco.
the alfresco additional requirements. So perhaps it almost needs to be actually worded. The committee thanks Health New Zealand for their submission and acknowledges the proposed implementations in relation to smoke-free and vape-free requirements, something like that. Because what we agreed was that would be an operationalisation of their feedback, not being specifically expressly included in the bylaw.
Sure. Given it's already been dealt with, as you rightly point out, should we just acknowledge and thank them for their submission? So put a full stop after submission. The committee thanks Health New Zealand for their submission. Is happy to move that, Councillor Jennings. Thank you. As a second, Mayor Bernie seconds. Discussion appears to be none. I'll put it. Those in favour, please say aye. Against, say no. It's carried. And that is it. We move back now to the substantive motion. So back on page 22. What's that clever wording we have? We've got some clever wording that we used for the previous bylaw. Again.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Just to be annoying, there was, prior to our adjournment, we talked about potentially some more small changes to section 3 of the bylaw, which was to include the environmental protection element. And I'm sorry, I can't find exactly the page, but I'll get to it. And then the other was I threw out some suggested wording which might need a little bit of polishing, but I don't know if you just wanted to give Vi the opportunity to comment on whether comfort around including those.
Thank you for that, Councillor Jennings. Vi.
Thank you, Councillor Jennings. Yes, in terms of comfort level, yes, we could add it into section 3 in terms of the purpose, and add an extra bullet there around protection of the environment.
Okay, happy with that, Councillor Jennings. That first point, and the second.
So the additions were protect the natural environment was one of the purposes, and then the other that I threw out there and happy to be I'll move it, but acknowledge there might want to be some amendment, is maintain equitable access to public places except where reasonable controls or restrictions are appropriate.
So you are moving that? Yeah, I'm happy to second from the chair. Any discussion around that? Yep, we'll hear that again, Sam.
Maintain equitable access to public places except where reasonable controls or restrictions are appropriate.
Thank you. Did you wish to speak to that at all?
I just think, just as I say, like the intent of capturing that right up the front, it doesn't do a lot in terms of the actual application of the bylaw, but I think it just reinforces some of what we heard today, which is that real fear that we're trying to take stuff away or be this nanny state council that we're just trying to just to be the fun police, but it really is about setting up the framework and the toolbox for us to respond to these things. And actually, it's really interesting because one of the first things they teach us in law school first year is that as a citizen, you are free to do absolutely anything you want unless the law says you can't, right? And that's what the state does. Whereas the state is required to give itself powers and authorize itself to do stuff. And so I always remember that as a free citizen, you can do whatever you want. And that's where these bylaws are so important, because we are restricting freedoms and rights. And so we need to make sure that when we're doing so, that we're doing it for the appropriate outcome and we're doing it for the right reason, but that we're also building in reasonable conditions and reasonable discretion and some flexibility, because there are a range of situations that this particular bylaw will have to respond to. So I think that just adding that statement up front just helps us reinforce the importance of the bylaw and what we're trying to achieve.
Thank you for that, and Austin Mew will be very happy with that. It sets the tone beautifully. Thank you. Councillor Tamihana, did you?
No, I just wanted to endorse what Sam said. I think that's a really good way of framing it and sharing that to the community going forward. So, no, I agree with that totally.
Thank you. And now, are there any other matters before we move to the global resolution?
Oh, just
Yeah.
beyond the final resolution,
Yes, sure.
if you would allow me a comment before you close the meeting, that would be
Oh,
great.
absolutely. So you're happy for us to do the final resolution first? Certainly. Okay. So the committee recommends council adopt a final version of the proposed Public Places Bylaw 2024, noting the foregoing resolutions. Someone prepared to move? Councillor Mayor Burney moves. Councillor Jennings second. Any discussion? Final discussion. Thank you.
Can I just make one comment? Thanks to Vi and the team for all of your hard work in putting this together. It's not always easy to sit here and have people nitpick over and wordsmith various issues, but I want to thank you for putting it together, and hopefully some of the refinements and additional recommendations that this committee's made today is helped the overall outcome. But acknowledgement to your team and you and your team.
Totally agree, and thank you for those words, Councillor Jennings. Could I also acknowledge Could I also acknowledge the hearings committee? I really value the fact that there was some real contestable views around the table, and that's us doing our job. So I want to thank you for that, Councillor Tamihana.
No, I just wanted to resonate your words as well, and thank Vi and the team for the work. And I really appreciate that the feedback we provided, you could see it being built into the bylaws and into the discussions, and that was really, I think, really good process. And just also wanted to thank the submitters too, those people that took the time to not only submit but actually come in person and talk to their submissions. So.
And just a final thanks from me is to Councillor Tukapua. This will be probably your last hearing, and the weight and the dedication you bring to these hearings has only been a couple this time, but it's really valuable, and I can't understate how much I appreciate the value you bring to it. So thank you also to you. Councillor Tukapua, did you? Where's the chair? Could I put the motion? Did we not put it? No. Oh, that was. I'm going to put it. Those in favour, please say aye. Against, say no. Thank you, Mayor Burney. Councillor Tukapua.
Oh, I just, I don't know. I could take this offline, but basically, I want to acknowledge Councillor Tamihana's earlier commentary before around customary rights in the fire lighting, and offer up some well, I hope it's some comfort that, I guess, on page 26, under 41, where it says we reached out to our 3 local iwi, through to Tūmatakahuki, Waipukorangi, Tāne, their feedback about the content of the bylaw was neutral, and they didn't specifically raise it. Maybe they just missed it, but I guess for me, I wanted to share this with you, why I supported it, is because there is already rules or legislation in place applied nationally around what you can do with your own fire at home. But this specifically speaks to public places, and beaches being one of it. And I'm comforted, or the approach that council will take in the first instance is we're not going around looking at families lighting their fires, and it's only those that are reported because they're getting out of hand, and having a mechanism to pull that up and address it. And the other thing is, because I understand the customary practice of lighting a fire at a beach and doing the things that we do, which is quite separate to what we would do on a marae in our own space. And I know that, well, I feel like that zone is protected, as in I don't see any authorities coming up in there in the same way they might drive up to your little spot on the beach. And so I think it's okay, and if in the future something did cause a real issue around that, then at that point we could, as a case-by-case situation, look at that and think, well, what can we learn from this, and how might we amend, if need be, the existing bylaw if that was the case. But for now, I think it's going to be okay.
Thank you for those words. So we'll finish with our karakia.